and welcome to this session about biology. We're going to cover webinar chapter 31, the second two sections. So chapter 31, section 3 and 31, section 4. We have an earlier recording that has section 1 and section 2, so be sure to watch those as well. If you're here live, we're going to have questions on the screen for you to answer. If you're watching the recording, you'll also see those questions and just kind of answer as we go. There's nothing to submit. They're not required for Penn Foster in any way. They are just to kind of keep you on track with this lesson as we go through it. And if you're here live, you can ask questions at any time. So if you're here on a computer, you'll have this little speech bubble icon. Looks like that. Click that to ask questions. If you're on a phone or tablet, you get a question mark icon. You click that. Either one will bring up an area for you to type questions, and all you have to do is type your question. I will get it and be able to answer it. You're not going to interrupt at all, so ask anything that you want at any point. If you need me to go back and explain something better, if you have any questions about what I just said, if you have any questions about anything else in the lesson, just ask. So chapter 31 is about the nervous system, and it's specifically focusing on the anatomy of a human body. So it's the nervous system of a human body. So it's divided into the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So the first sections of the book talked about the central nervous system, and now we're looking at peripheral. The peripheral nervous system are the nerves that are shown in blue in this diagram. So everything in yellow is the central nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord, and then the blue nerves are the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is divided into the sensory division, which receives signals and sends them to the central nervous system, and the motor division, which sends commands from the central nervous system to the rest of the body. Oh, so I'm sorry, that's the peripheral, that's the sensory goes to the nervous system, the motor goes from the nervous system to the rest of the body. The motor division of the central nervous system carries the commands from the central nervous system to muscles in the body, telling them when to contract. Or it sends signals to glands in the body, telling them to secrete certain chemicals. And you may have noticed that I'm referring to signals and messages from the central nervous system instead of just saying from the brain. This is because while most signals come from the brain, there is a certain type that comes right from the spinal cord. These are called reflex arcs, which are used to respond to pain quickly by having the message travel to the spinal cord, but not all the way to the brain. So if you touch a very hot pan on the stove, your hand pulls back immediately, and sometimes you may notice your hand started moving before you even noticed the pain. This is because a very strong signal was sent to the spinal cord, and the spinal cord reflexively sent out a signal to move. It then also forwards the message to the brain so that your brain can interpret it as pain and your brain can take over the rest of the response. But the reflex arc is just from the spinal cord and back to the body part to make it happen really fast. And it's generally in response to pain because it doesn't want to waste any time with sending the message all the way to the brain. So the motor division of the nervous system is divided into two systems. The somatic nervous system sends signals for activities under conscious control, which is mainly moving your skeletal muscles. If you wanted to raise your arm above your head, the motor neurons that send the signal from the brain to your arm are part of the somatic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system sends signals for activities that you do not consciously control. For example, the motor neurons that control your heart rate are part of the autonomic nervous system. You can't consciously decide that you want your heart rate to speed up or slow down and have it happen. Your brain takes care of that on its own. So that's somatic, which is what you intend to do, what you think about doing, and the autonomic system is automatic. But the autonomic system is even further broken down into the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. And these have opposite effects on the same organs. For example, the sympathetic system speeds up heart rate when needed, and the parasympathetic system slows down heart rate when needed. They work together to achieve a level of fine control over the body's involuntary functions. In general, the sympathetic system prepares for and responds to intense activity, and the parasympathetic system returns the body to normal or to a resting state. So we just got a bunch of new terms and new divisions of the nervous system. So let's just kind of review the organization. So in the peripheral nervous system, which is everything in your body except the central nervous system, it's broken down into the motor and the sensory. And the motor nervous system is broken down into the autonomic and somatic systems. And let's just review what that means. Autonomic are the ones that happen automatically. Okay, you can think of that. It's the things that you don't control on purpose, things like your heart rate, your digestion. These are just happening in your body without you thinking about it. Somatic are the ones that you intend to do. So somatic is mainly movement. When you say, you need to take a step or you need to raise your arm, that's your somatic nervous system. You're thinking about doing it and then you do it. Autonomic is broken down some more into sympathetic and parasympathetic. So again, sympathetic is mostly speeding up the body, preparing it for intense activity, and parasympathetic is the opposite, slowing it down, getting it back down to a resting state. So that's actually all that there is in the first section. Well, it's the third section, and the first section that we're doing today. So we've got a couple of review questions. So these are just on the screen. There's nothing for you to click on to answer. We're just going to think about what the answer is. So this first one has 2 blanks, and here's your answers. I'm going to label them A, B, C, and D, just to make things a little easier. So when a stimulus contacts the body, the blank sends signals to the central nervous system, and the blank receives signals from the central nervous system. So which set of answers fills in these blanks in order? I'm going to let you think about it for about 10 or 20 seconds, and then we'll go over the answer. Okay, so when a stimulus contacts the body, the sensory nervous system sends the signals to the central nervous system. Okay, so it's sensing that stimulus, okay, whatever is touching your body, and it's sending the signal to the central nervous system. Okay, in the second half, the motor nervous system receives the signals from the central nervous system. So your brain says, okay, we're going to do something, we're going to create a movement, and it sends the signals through the motor nervous system to the body part that needs to move. And one more question for this section, which is true about the somatic nervous system? So again, I'll just put letters on there. We've got A, B, C, and D. So which is true? The somatic nervous system, A, is part of the sensory nervous system. B, includes both the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. C, regulates conscious voluntary activities. Or D, regulates heart rate and digestion. I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. And our answers. So it's not A. The somatic nervous system is part of the motor nervous system, not sensory. How about B? It includes both the sympathetic and parasympathetic. Nope, that's the autonomic that does this, not somatic. Our correct answer is C. It regulates conscious voluntary activities. And D is also wrong because that's not conscious or voluntary. That's something the autonomic does. Okay, so I would suggest going back, pausing the video and writing down this little diagram here so you can see what's part of what. These don't really break down into anything, so sensory doesn't break down any further, somatic doesn't break down any further, parasympathetic doesn't break down any further. It's the ones on this side that break down. So peripheral is broken into motor, sensory. Motor is broken down to autonomic and somatic. Autonomic is broken down into sympathetic and parasympathetic. So it's a good idea to have this organizational chart. Okay, and that takes us to talking about the sensory nervous system. The variety of information that's taken in by the sensory division is very vast. It's varied. Different organs tend to specialize in receiving different types of information. Okay, so we see with our eyes and hear with our ears and taste with our tongues. They can do this because there are specialized cells that respond to different stimulations, and these are all called receptors. So in the next slides, we're going to look at different types of receptors. Chemoreceptors respond to contact with certain chemicals. These are the receptors in the mouth and nose that transmit taste and smell. So when you eat a food and you taste it, or you go outside and you smell a flower, or you smell something less pleasant, it's actually because there's chemicals that are in the food or in the air. And when those certain chemicals touch your tongue or touch the inside of your nose, your brain receives those signals and interprets it as a smell or a taste. The skin has several types of receptors to help the brain identify what the body is touching. So we've got mechanoreceptors, which respond to pressure, vibrations, and stretching. Thermoreceptors respond to temperature changes. Pain receptors respond to tissue injury anywhere in the body. Photoreceptors in the eyes respond to light, transmitting information about the frequency and intensity of the light waves. In the ear, mechanoreceptors respond to patterns of vibration that make sound. And all of these receptors send impulses to sensory neurons, which transmit that signal to the central nervous system. So looking at a couple of these sensory organs in more depth, ears have two jobs, hearing and balance. Sound waves move through the air as vibrations and cause several parts of the ear to vibrate with the same pattern. The eardrums, bones, the fluid in the cochlea, and the hair lining in the cochlea all carry the pattern of vibrations. The hair cells in the cochlea are the sensory receptors that send messages to the brain. The brain interprets the pattern of messages as the volume of the sound and the pitch of the sound. The other job is that the inner ear has structures called semicircular canals. These are filled with fluid, and the fluid moves when you move your head. So if you tilt your head sideways, it changes the levels of the fluid in those canals. And the semicircular canals are also lined with hairs, and the moving fluid moves the hairs when your head changes position. So this all sends impulses to the brain, which uses these messages to determine your position. And that's what helps you keep your balance. Oop. Now as for the eyes, light enters the eye through the pupil as the iris, which is the colored part of the eye, contracts or opens the pupil to control the amount of light that gets in. The cornea and the lens focus the light so that it lands on the retina on the back of the eyeball. And photoreceptors are the cells on the back of the retina that respond to the stimulus of light. Some, the rods, respond to any light and they don't differentiate colors. Others, called the cones, only respond to certain frequencies of light. And since different cones respond to different frequencies of light, that allows us to have color vision. If we look at something red, only the cones that respond to the red frequencies are triggered. The information from the photoreceptors goes to the brain through the optical nerve. All right, so that ends our short look at the sensory division. Oh, there we go. Of the peripheral nervous system. So we have a couple more reviews. What do the semicircular canals do? Do they respond to vibrations to help you hear, respond to changes in the fluids to help you balance, respond to different frequencies of light, or respond to all frequencies of light? I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. So the semicircular canals are these parts of your ear. And let's think about our answers. Respond to vibrations to help you hear? Nope. You have cells in the cochlea that do that. So that's down here. So they're related. They're both in your inner ear here. They kind of look like they're on a similar structure, but the cochlea is filled with fluid that responds to the vibrations that come through the rest of your ear. So you got all these vibrations that come through there. So that's what helps you hear. The semicircular canals up here, they're filled with fluid, and they respond to changes in the fluid levels that help you balance. And then our last two here are about eyes, not ears. So responding to different frequencies of light is the cones on the retina, and responding to all frequencies of light is the rods on the retina. So the only one that's about semicircular canals is that second option, respond to changes in their fluids to help you balance. And our last review is kind of a big one here. Match the stimulus to the receptor that responds to it. So our stimuli on the left, we've got injury to tissues, presence of chemicals, temperature change, waves of light, pressure, or vibrations. And you need to match them up to these receptors. We've got photoreceptors, chemoreceptors, mechanoreceptors, pain receptors, and thermoreceptors. So I'll give you a few seconds to think about it, and we'll go over the correct answers for this one. So injury to tissues is what triggers pain receptors. The presence of chemicals triggers chemoreceptors. Again, that's in your mouth and your nose to be able to taste and smell. Temperature changes, that would be thermoreceptors. Those are in your skin. Waves of light would be photoreceptors on the retina of your eye. And pressure or vibrations is mechanoreceptors. And those are kind of everywhere. All right, so that actually wraps up this chapter. Again, check the recordings so that you can see the beginning of this chapter, sections 1 and 2, and lots of other recordings about biology will be coming your way. And if you have any questions and you're watching this later, you can contact your instructor one of these ways.